and Bertha's scared, and Sam is like, pretty much naked and wearing one shoe.
Hey, you enjoyed the dinner. Come back with me. Ah.
What if the FBI, in fact, had set this whole thing up? Sam's a noted womanizer, so that's kind of an easy cover.
You are listening to Tape Spaghetti, a show about the twisted and tangled innards of the music industry. Some of this content may not be for all listeners or viewers, so if it isn't for you, no harm, no foul. We'll just catch you on the next one. All right, without further ado, let's get into this episode. Here we go. Apologies, folks. I just have one quick note. We've been working on this podcast for a little while before we actually launched it, and it originally had a different name. We realized that name was taken, so as you know, because you clicked on this, it is now called Tape Spaghetti, not Riff Session, and so that is why we refer to it as that here a couple times in these first few episodes. But after a while, it'll all smooth out. All right, folks, that's enough. Let's get into it.
What's up, everybody, and welcome to yet another episode of Riff Session. I am Scott. This is Blake. Blake, how are you doing today?
Oh, man, it's like you've been doing this for years. Look at that.
Oh, I'm doing my best.
Yeah.
I like that Tombstone shirt you're wearing.
Oh.
That's clutch.
Man, I follow this print shop in Wyoming, and it's amazing that I don't own every single thing that they've ever printed. It's called Cult of Cult. They do not sponsor this podcast, but man,
not yet.
But man, they have their standard line, which is great. Mm-hmm. I own several of those pieces, but then they do these random weekend drops, and normally I can resist. But I saw this Tombstone shirt drop, and it was like, take my money here, take it all. There you go.
100%.
Yeah,
100%. Mm-hmm. I like it. Well, I'm quite relaxed today, not just because I am drinking my recess mood magnesium sparkling water, but because I was traveling last week. I was in.
Boy, that sounded like an ad spot if I've ever heard.
Yeah, and it's not. I would love to be sponsored by these guys.
We will not bow to any corporate sponsor.
We'll bow to any corporate sponsors.
Yes,
any of them.
Yes.
But I was on a long-awaited vacation. I was to the small Caribbean island of Grenada, which I had never been to before, which was super cool. It's like, compared to the other islands like around there, they don't get a lot of tourist traffic, comparatively at least. So they don't yet know that tourists are a thing to be loathed and feared. And as a result, they're really nice people. They're just lovely. They're like, oh, you're here. Let me show you around our island. Mm-hmm. Like, oh, you don't know yet.
Oh, I know exactly how friendly they are there. I know. I got a little beef with that place,
What's your beef with the place?
We haven't talked about this. So many years ago, I finally got a girlfriend.
Okay.
It was wonderful. I was like, somebody.
Is this in addition to your wife, or are you talking about your wife?
I'm talking about my now wife, but
okay.
But it was close, and it's all because of Grenada. So we started dating, and she was already had this big trip planned to the Caribbean islands with her friends. And so we started dating, and like a week later, she's gone. So I'm like, this already kind of sucks, right? Mm-hmm. Because, now I'm by myself. Then she sends me these pictures of this big, tall, muscular Grenadian man who attempted to marry her. He was proposing. Fortunately, she prefers her men short and dumb, and therefore she decided to stay with me.
She made the right choice. Well, now I wonder if I met this man.
Possibly.
It's not a big island.
He never got off the island. I don't know.
Huh. Or maybe he just went back, because it's really, really beautiful. It super is. But because of that, I've been nice and relaxed. The weird thing is, like, I sleep easy when I'm traveling or when I'm on vacation, but I also wake up a lot. Like when you wake up a lot during the evening, you have a lot of dreams, or I think you always have the same amount of dreams,
but you remember.
But when you wake up, you remember them. I don't know what that all is. So I've been having a lot of these sort of vivid dreams I wake up from, and I'm like, oh my God, that didn't actually happen. Sometimes it's like a thank God, and sometimes it was just like a very, very normal dream. But then you have to just like sort out that, like, no, you didn't have that conversation with a coworker.
Sure. Sure.
which is very strange. But because of this, I've been living a rich dream life lately, and it prompted me to ask you this question. You play music and have for many years, as do I, and have for many years. So have you had the experience of you're dreaming and you write this song and the song's great, and then you wake up and sometimes you remember the song and sometimes you don't? Has this happened to you? It
has, but I can never actually remember the song. I just know that I wrote a song in my dream, and I wake up and I'm like, well, maybe, I don't know. It never sticks.
I have, like, frequently it doesn't stick. And then you're just like, what was that thing? That was so great. But sometimes I've had it where I wake up and I can remember a little bit of it. And I think like what I would have to do is like have like a recorder by the side of my bed and like immediately pull it out and sing into it. Cause it's gone after like 30 seconds.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But what I don't know is like, things make sense in your dreams, that don't really make sense in your waking life. And so I'm always curious, are those great songs, are they actually great or do they just kind of seem great?
Right. No, the closest thing I have is when I was trying to come up with a name for my solo project. I couldn't think of anything that I was really liking that wasn't already taken. And then right before falling asleep one night, I like had this weird thing come into my brain of like American Cyclops. And then I was like, I'll remember that in the morning. It's too good. I couldn't possibly forget it. I forgot it. I could not remember what it was at all. All I knew was I had a great idea right before bed because it was really like the last thought I had while conscious. Like, oh.
Yep. That's when your brain does its hardest work. Now we need to really unpack the day.
Exactly.
Even though we won't remember any of it.
You remember that thing you said to that girl in 12th grade? Yeah, you regret that, don't you? Yep. And so I forgot it and went about my life. And I was just like, I hope I can remember at some point. And then a couple nights later, same thing, right? As I'm falling asleep, American Cyclops. And I was like, wake up, wait, like slap myself awake, grab the phone, type it in, got it. But yeah, that's the closest I've came. It's like that right before falling asleep thing.
I know that experience very, very well. But it ties into our topic for today. Which you don't know about. Yes, we do have a topic. I didn't just bring you here for nothing at all.
Oh, okay, cool.
I've done at least, a modicum of thinking about this. But there is at least, and probably way more than this, at least one song that you almost certainly know that came to the artist in this very same way. And that song is A Change Is Gonna Come by Sam Cooke.
Oh, great
Which,
song.
according to Sam, at least, he had a dream and the entire song just came to him just like that in the dream. And he woke up and wrote it all down. And fortunately, thank God, I guess, remembered the song. And that's the song that we have today. Apparently, it just all wrote itself in there in his head in his dream.
Wow.
Which is crazy.
I did not know that about the song. That is a very productive dream.
Yeah. But the other thing that you may or may not know about that song is that, Sam Cooke had a lot of great songs, but that I think is like, that's his seminal song. That's the one that people remember that like is one of the 100 great songs, ever made. But that song actually was not released while Sam Cooke was alive.
Oh, what? Really?
Did you know that?
No, I did not.
Yeah. It came out posthumously because Sam Cooke was murdered.
That I do know. Yeah.
Just a few weeks prior to that song being released. He had re-recorded it for a single and then he was murdered.
Dun, dun, dun.
And then it came out a few weeks later. And so I thought today, because there's only so many musical murders. And the way that we're pacing, you're going to have all of them. And so I felt that I had to act fast. And claim a murder or two for myself.
I think that's probably a good move. All right. Yeah.
And so I thought about a few of the various very cool, which I'm not actually going to list out because I'm sure that we will cover them in time. Probably very quickly. Yeah, I guess I did. Very interesting musical murder.
There we go. The coolest murdering that's ever happened.
Yeah, and this one I thought would be pretty cool. Word. Yeah. So today we are going to talk about Sam Cooke, specifically, unfortunately the surroundings of his death, but also a little bit about the man himself. Does that sound good?
Sounds really good. And actually, accidentally, I've done a little bit of diving into Sam, probably in the last month or so. So some of this might be somewhat familiar to me, or maybe there will be some new stuff. I imagine there'll be going to be some new stuff here because I only did some light scratching.
Great. Well, hey, if I miss anything, feel free to chip in.
Okay, will do. I'm excited to get into this tale. Let's go.
Yeah, you got it. All right. So, Sam Cooke, like a little bit of setting the stage for those that aren't familiar. But, he's from Clarksdale, Mississippi, like, one of the great legendary musical towns. He was born to a Baptist minister. And, they had a bunch of children. They had 8 children. I had to look it up in my notes real quick. So, great big family. And even when he's a kid, he kind of is doing the Michael Jackson thing of there's, a family band and he's singing in church and he's like he's the one, that's the really, really great singer of the group. They eventually moved to Chicago as a whole family. And, as he gets a little bit older, he becomes the lead singer of a group called the Soulsters, that you've probably heard a bunch of the tunes of. Like their Jesus Gave Me Water is the one that I know really well, from 1950.
Yep.
And they're making like just straight gospel stuff. Like none of this stuff is like secular or secular leaning. But if you listen to it now, I mean, like I love this music, even though I'm not like a big gospel guy, I guess. It's just such a vibe. It's very like happy gospel music. Harmonies are great. And more than anything, I mean, and this will come up multiple times, but Sam Cooke's voice is so freaking good.
It's incredible. It's ridiculous.
He has, I think, like one of the great voices, like, Sinatra, like it's certainly male voices, like Sinatra's up there. I personally love Jim Morrison's voice, though I know we might disagree on that. But Sam Cooke has this
another time.
We'll save that for later. He has this incredible, just velvety, like super recognizable voice and tone and timbre. And something with my modern ears that I love listening back to the Sam stuff is like his pitch is so good. This is an era before auto-tune.
Way before.
And it's an era specifically where like in the music business, time is money. And like we've touched on in prior episodes, people that can do a great job, like on take one, are extra valuable because you're saving a lot of money from all the different people working in the recording studio, not to mention the tape and the lathe and all that sort of different stuff. And Sam is one of these guys, right? You just get the sense that like every take he ever did was perfect. And the thing that I love is that you can tell listening to him, as perfect as his pitch is, there are these like pitch variations, that's happening. He'll be a little flat or a little sharp somewhere, but never does it sound bad. Like it just adds to the soul and the feeling of his particular voice. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's he's one of those ones that you hear and you try to get good at things. You practice, you put a lot of effort into things, and then you hear someone like Sam, and he put a lot of time in. That's not to take away from that, but that guy was born with it. That's just natural. That's just in his blood. He came out sounding like that.
Yeah, it's that mixture. I mean, just like when you hear about like a Michael Jordan, character where it's like they had an incredible raw talent, but it was also harnessed when they were really young and they just kept using it and honing it and practicing it all the time.
Yep.
And after a bunch of work, they like landed at the age of 18, just being amazing.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
There's no replacement for that. But so, Sam's the lead singer of this group, and they're kind of like, they're very much making straight gospel music, but they're kind of crossing over in terms of audience because Sam's voice is just so good. So there's stories about like young girls of the age all showing up at Soulstirers shows and rushing the stage at the end to try to, get to Sam. So he's very much like a pure religious character, doing nothing but singing the gospel of the Lord. And yet, in the fans' eyes, he becomes
souls in a different way.
It was stirring some souls in a different way. That's exactly right. And so, I think once you're seeing the ability to stir those souls in that different way, people start to wonder, there might be a wider audience here.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Right.
Yep.
But at this time, Sam's like pretty well known in this gospel world. And it's funny because to me, if I listen to Sam's like secular music, so to speak, and I listen to those earlier gospel things, like, yeah, the gospel stuff it's gospel, but like it doesn't to my now ears sound like worlds different.
No.
No.
It doesn't.
But at the time, it was. So like when they start talking about Sam moving into like secular music, he released his first like single, and I think maybe the whole first album under an alias, under the name Dale Cooke.
Because, I didn't know that.
Yeah, because at the time they're like, Sam Cooke is a gospel singer of some renown. We don't like to mix. How are people going to think if a gospel singer makes this dirty rock and roll music?
Which is funny because if you really compare the two, like side by side, sonically they have a lot of the same things going on. Not entirely. There's differences for sure, but like the main thing is just like, okay, now we're singing about other things other than the Bible. Like really,
right?
It's not really that crazy, but to the time, at the time, it was radical.
Yeah, and I mean, and it's funny too because as is covered in that South Park episode, must have been 20 years ago, where they start a gospel group. Songs about Jesus and songs about girls or boys are not that different. In the South Park episode, they're like, just replace baby with Jesus, and you got a Christian song now, right? And I think that especially was the case back in those days with gospel and Motown and stuff. They're very similar. They're similar in terms of song structure. They're these songs of adoration, regardless of who that is adoring. And I do think Sam kind of pushed that out a little bit further, as his career went on. But again, to me, they just sound so similar. So it's kind of funny. I mean, people at the time, hearing them talk about this transition, it's as though he joined the Misfits.
Right. Yeah.
And that's really not what was going on.
Like, no, not quite. No.
Which, I mean, that would be an amazing musical mashup. If what if the Misfits were headed by Sam Cooke?
Oh, I would listen to that all day, every day.
I think it would work because Glenn Danzig, I think, is another of the great male voices.
Yeah, 100%. I think that would work surprisingly well because
I think it would work great.
Glenn Danzig was always trying to be Elvis, so he's got those inflections in there, and Elvis got some of that certainly from Sam Cooke and a whole bunch of other people. So yeah,
and just like Jim Morrison was trying to be Sinatra.
Mm-hmm.
It's very much the same thing. But so Sam does go secular and eventually drops the Dale Cooke, and he adds an E. I think his birth name is Cook. He added the E to signal, I'm a new man now.
Okay.
At some level. And then, the rest from here, there's a ton of songs that everybody knows. Like You Send Me, A Change Is Gonna Come, as we mentioned before, Cupid, Chain Gang, like Another Saturday Night, Twisting the Night Away, like a bunch of legendary songs. And you do see like this variation where it's like the early stuff, like Twisting the Night Away is just kind of jumping on the Chubby Checker, twist thing.
Yep.
Another Saturday Night and Cupid, like these are kind of standard Motowny, schlocky poppy bubblegum songs. But then you get like Chain Gang, which is a whole different thing. He's talking about working on the chain gang, on a prison chain gang. And we probably take for granted, that it's normal to sing about like being in jail as a popular singer. But less so then, for sure, right? Sure. I mean, Johnny Cash did a lot of this, afterwards as well. But that was kind of odd to have someone with that velvety of a voice, in kind of speaking to that life or that lifestyle.
Yeah, yeah. It was definitely. It's hard to shift our mindset. You and I grew up, listening to various degrees of screaming death music. And so like, it's not really, that seems so mild to us, right? Mm-hmm. Even the Misfits, by the time we were really seriously diving into music, weren't that intense. Lyrically, yes, but not sonically. They weren't that.
Yeah. Listening back to I knew of the Misfits Skull long before I like had listened to the music, and then I listened to it and I was like, this isn't that scary and
this
heavy.
Is like rockabilly, like it's great, but it's like,
I was like, this is fantastic, but this is nothing of what I was expecting.
Yeah, I was ready for. I mean, by that point, I had already heard Slayer, so I was expecting at least that level of intensity there,
or at least like Minor Threat or something else like of the time, that was kind of similar. But no, not at all.
No, it's a Elvis. It's rockabilly sped up. It's great. But again, all that to say is the Misfits sound kind of mild to us.
Mm-hmm.
If you had played the Misfits even back then, people would have been like, "This band must not exist. They're illegal. Like we can't have this."
Oh yeah,
yeah.
Yeah, and to the same turn, you know, twisting the night away. That's rock and roll, right? Like, even though musically it sounds a little similar, there's a big difference between Jesus Gave Me Water and I'm dancing with a girl all night.
Yes, definitely.
That's a very different message, especially to people at the time where they're like, you were with a woman at night?
You're a scoundrel.
Yeah, it's a different world. But
and
so,
not only
you know,
at night, but all night?
all night, exactly.
Yeah.
Twisting the night away. Right?
Crying out loud. These kids and they're twisting the night away.
Mm-hmm. And as always, you know, as always happens generationally, the like baby boomers who are the generation of this music being very normal for them and their parents being like, you're just listening to the devil's music, talking about another Saturday night and whatnot. And then they grow up and that music becomes the pure, this is good music. And then, you know, the Misfits, that's the problematic music. And there's a whole other generation that thinks the Misfits is totally fine, but, you know, Under Oath or something is, you know, unbelievable. They don't even sing anymore. And the cycle continues, right?
Yes.
It always continues. But, you know, all in all, Sam Cooke has this like kind of shortish career, like under a decade where he's like in popular music, but he does a ton. He has 29 top hits, like a bunch of legendary hits. Something that fascinates me, he started his own record label and eventually started his own publishing imprint as well. So he was like quite good at the business side, and very smart to like maintain ownership of things like this and really kind of have that control that a lot of people, this was a revolutionary time for an artist to have control over those aspects of their music was, you know, mostly unheard of.
Yeah. Yeah. Nobody really thought about it. It was still the whole game of like, you're going to give me a bunch of money to sing into a can. Like that was the general thought. But Sam, excuse me, had the foresight to realize that this was like an asset that he'd use.
Yeah, exactly. And really kind of set it all up for himself. So, you know, Sam has this legendary career and is, you know, one of the great voices and just universally beloved. And then it all comes to a screeching halt on December 11th, 1964.
Ooh, even earlier than I realized. I thought it was late.
Yeah, fairly early. Yeah, this is not the period of the late 60s when, you know, everything kind of all hell broke loose in all areas of the country and the musical world. This is still kind of buttoned up days. You know, the Beatles aren't doing acid yet.
Right.
Or maybe they just started to.
Yeah. They hadn't told anybody about it in either case.
Right. Exactly. So kind of jumping from his career to, you know, a little bit about him and then eventually kind of we're going to dive in deep on this exact night. Right.
Okay.
But, you know, in addition to this like splendid career, you know, the guy is this voice of an angel and singing about a lot of these puppy love things and some more interesting stuff like Chain Gang and whatnot. But on the side, Sam Cooke is, well, he's a bit of a womanizer. He has this reputation for a lot of his adult life. He was married the first time in 1953 to a singer named Dolores Cooke, and she eventually they divorced. They you know it was. I've heard various stories about kind of their relationship, but you know there's some level of tumult there in that it ends in divorce, and then like not too long thereafter, she actually dies in a car crash as well. But they're divorced at this time, but he's like he pays for her funeral expenses, so like he's a good dude about it. But that's kind of the first woman in his life. And then he marries his second wife, Barbara Campbell. They had a number of children, one of whom named Vincent, drowned in the swimming pool at their family house, which is really sad. So, you know, even to this point, like the guy's got some, not his fault certainly, but has been through some hard things, you know, in his life, a little bit. But, you know, in addition to those three children, he has other children running around. There's at least three that were fathered like outside of those marriages and maybe more. And that probably isn't even really representative of all the philandering that's going on.
I think so. Correct me if I'm wrong here, but some of the sources when I was reading upon this, like this is not this is not actually a new thing for Sam. This was happening during the gospel days as well.
Yeah, this is the sense that I get as well. You know, and indeed, like various sources with this, some of it's he said, she said, you know, it's difficult to know. But yeah, he has this reputation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The women like Sam and Sam likes him back.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's it works out for everyone seemingly.
Sort of. Yeah.
Yeah. Until the night of December 11th, 1964.
Okay, here we go.
The long rumored evening of December 11th, 1964. So, what exactly happened on this night is a matter of some debate. There's a lot of different theories about what went down, who was telling the truth. And of course, at the end of that night, Sam ended up dead. So we don't have his story. And we just have some other people's stories to kind of piece together. So there's a lot of cool stuff to talk about here. I will give you, to start with, the sort of official story of what happened.
Okay. This is
cool.
As the authorities tell the tale, basically.
Yeah. It's kind of the story that developed, you know, when they're kind of picking up the pieces. So that night, Sam Cooke goes out on a date of sorts, right? And, you know, he goes out on this date, he goes to dinner, and then he goes back to a hotel, and something goes wrong with that particular date at the hotel, where they're kind of, you know, looking to, well, do what you do in a hotel or rather a motel afterwards. And then things kind of really hit the fan. So Elisa Boyer is the woman that he's out on a date with. And we do have her story after the fact. So Elisa's telling, which I think we should just start with, is that she went out on a date with Sam. They went to dinner. Things were a little bit weird. They, you know, like left, and, you know, she wants to go home, but Sam's not having that.
Okay.
So according to Elisa, Sam is like, no, we're going to go to a hotel and we're going to do the deed in the hotel. So they drive, you know, into Los Angeles, and they drive by a number of hotels, according to Elisa. And she's like, oh, what about these? But Sam has a particular hotel in mind, and that's the Hacienda Motel or Hacienda Motel in 91st and South Figueroa. And so they go here, and she commented that it seemed as though he knew his way around the hotel. Mm-hmm. You know, implying maybe this was a regular place that he took his people to. And so they get a hotel room there, and, you know, they go in, and at this point, you know, she's like resisting his advances, and he's, you know, basically trying to force himself on her. And so she is like, oh, I have to go to the bathroom before this happens. And Sam's like, yeah, okay. And so she goes to the bathroom and sees this as an opportunity for her to escape and not, you know, do things that she doesn't want to do with Sam Cooke. Sure. And so, you know, she runs out of the room and goes to grab her clothes, which are off, and in the process grabs most of his clothes too, because I guess they're in kind of a pile here. So she runs out and tries to talk to the hotel manager to like get her to help her, but can't quite get through to her or whatever. So she just basically takes off, right? Sam Cooke, meanwhile, is left with one shoe, basically, and I think his underpants as well, but not a lot of clothing.
Right. Not optimal.
not what you would want, right? Yes. And so Sam goes trying to find this woman, and he goes like and finds the same hotel manager's door, and he bangs on the door. And from this point, we don't have Elisa's story anymore. So we're jumping to two other stories, which are basically the three surviving stories that were directly there at the time. So the motel manager, her name is Bertha Franklin, and the motel's owner
sounds like a lady you don't want to tangle with.
Yeah, you never want to mess with a Bertha.
Yeah.
Really, a lot of these old names. I think, you know, because these were older ladies by the time you and I were young, and so you're like, you don't mess with them.
Right.
They'll mess you up.
That's right.
The motel's owner, similarly, is Evelyn Carr. So Bertha Franklin is on the phone with Evelyn Carr, in the office. And, someone knocks on the door, which of course is Sam. And he's asking for her, and she's like, "Oh, I'm on the phone. I'm in here." And so according to Bertha, Sam just like rushes in through the door, and Bertha's scared, and Sam is like, pretty much naked and wearing one shoe, and is, screaming about all this, saying whatnot.
And she probably doesn't recognize him in this state, right?
Right. Yeah. Seemingly
some
not.
Guy coming in at this point.
Certainly. Yeah. In her story of it, she doesn't know who the heck this guy is. It's just some raving sort of lunatic at the motel. And Evelyn, the owner, is listening through the phone, allegedly at least, and can hear all of this happening. So Sam gets like closer to her, and they actually get in a tussle. According to her story, he grabs her, and this becomes more of a physical altercation. And she has a broom, and so she's like hitting him in the head with a broom, and she's able to like get to her gun. And I've heard it both ways, that the gun happened first or the broom happened first. But she hits him in the head with a broomstick at some point, and she also is able to like get to the gun that she keeps, which is reasonable, I guess, for a motel operator who's there alone to have.
Yes.
And she shoots Sam right in the abdomen, and Sam says sort of famously, "Lady, you shot me." And it's said that he didn't say this in a he wasn't angry. He was like incredulous.
Right. Like, how dare you shoot?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
He's like, "Lady, you shot me." Just like confused. Right. And so, this, if she hit him with a broomstick after, this is where she hits him with a broomstick after already shooting him, which just seems a little bit odd to me. And then
if he still seems to be advancing and she's freaked out, I can kind of
yeah. Probably not a big gun, probably not the most stopping power. I don't know.
And you're not going down from a gut shot immediately either. It's painful.
You would know more about this than I.
It's extremely painful, but you're not going to die instantly. You're going to be in pain for a good long while.
Fair enough.
Especially with any handgun caliber.
Mm-hmm. So she hits him with the broomstick at this point, and then he falls down to the ground and he dies.
Mm-hmm. Bleeds out, I assume.
Yeah, assumably. She calls the police come and gather these stories. So the police have these three stories to kind of figure everything out from. They have, of course, Bertha Franklin, the hotel manager, Evelyn Carr, who was on the phone listening to this stuff through it. And then, of course, they have Elisa Boyer, the woman that Sam was with earlier. They all tell, a somewhat similar story. I mean, Elisa's story happens entirely prior to Bertha and Evelyn's. So they don't really corroborate exactly. I mean, they speak to different kind of points in the timeline. But Elisa's story, no one else would really know what happened outside of her in that, since Sam isn't around. And then of course you have Bertha, and then it seems like, Evelyn's like, I heard all this through the phone. So that's pretty much kind of the way it went down. So the police kind of look at this and, ultimately, consider that it was self-defense or what they call a justifiable homicide, because this woman was afraid. And I'll just say, like, even right there, that strikes me as a bit odd, because he's pretty much naked. He only has one shoe. He certainly doesn't have a weapon exactly. But at the same time, if she's saying he broke through the door and was, advancing on her and all this, I presumably she's a lot smaller than Sam Cooke. So, it does make sense to think that you would be pretty terrified in trying to stop this man.
Logically speaking, I mean, I'm just going to pretend that I'm Bertha in this situation. And somebody larger than me kicks through the door, basically nude, ranting and raving about his clothes. I'm going to be scared. Like, I'm definitely going to be like, this person is not right in the head. Even if it's making all the sense in the world from Sam's perspective, right? I need my clothes. And maybe he thinks they're in there for some reason, or he's just mad. And I don't know. I don't want to speculate too much because it's pure speculation. I don't really know. But I'm guessing that when all this occurred, sobriety wasn't fully intact. They were probably out at least having a couple drinks, if not more. So I don't anticipate that Sam was in his right mind at all, because he's mad that he just got left. He's mad that he has no clothes. He's walking outside in this condition. Like he has to be in a highly disturbed mental state at the very least. So I don't imagine him making a lot of sense when he's coming through the door.
Right.
So are there other theories? What's the other theory?
There are, and we'll get to that. So, but kind of first, like the way it specifically, I had to look it up to remind myself, but the way that it kind of specifically went down is that they got the stories of these women, the police did. And, you know, it kind of made sense to them that like Bertha Franklin's story was corroborated by Evelyn, the owner. So that makes sense. Elisa's story, they're kind of just going off what she has to say there too. So they subject Elisa and also Bertha to polygraph or lie detector tests.
Right. Which are famously unreliable now. We know
yes. Now we know that they're very unreliable, but at that time, I'm not sure that that was as widely known. Because seemingly kind of piecing it together after the fact, it seems like the lie detector test was the thing that really convinced the police these people are telling the truth.
Okay.
And this is probably what happened. So because of that, the police didn't really push it beyond that. And it was, you know, it was a coroner's jury that ruled on this. So that certainly doesn't sound like there was like a trial in a traditional, like any sort of criminal court or anything.
Right.
I'm less familiar with how a coroner's jury works, but it sounds like basically it wasn't investigated as anything too weird in terms of foul play. They took everyone at their word. It was self-defense. And then that was kind of it.
Wouldn't it make sense though, if like at least one piece of evidence would be like, did she actually have some of his clothes? You know, when the police finally caught up with, was it Lisa? Is that
she did?
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Elisa Boyer. Yep.
Elisa Boyer.
So she did have that. So that kind of made sense. But even at the time, there was some concern from like some fairly high profile people who were Sam's friends. So, you know, Muhammad Ali said if Sam Cooke had been Frank Sinatra, the Beatles, or Ricky Nelson, the FBI would have investigated.
I think some more investigation is warranted. You know,
if you take nothing else away from kind of the investigation, the general sense is that they didn't look into it that far. They went far enough to give some lie detector tests, you know, so like they didn't just like take them at their word completely, but they didn't look into it too far. And one interesting note is that Etta James, famous, incredible singer in her own right, went to the funeral and they had an open casket at the funeral. And she commented that, you know, it looked like his head was barely hanging onto his neck. And that he was just basically, you know, had the absolute crap beat out of him, which is odd and a bit inconsistent with the idea of there being this like single strike with a handle of a broom. That doesn't really seem, especially from like a smaller woman, that doesn't seem like quite enough to do that kind of damage. You know, there was a tussle, he fell to the floor, who knows? But the general, you know, sense from people at the time that knew Sam was that this didn't really add up completely. And you know, no one went so far as to like, you know, doubt the victim or anything like that, but just to say that it didn't make a whole lot of sense. And obviously, you know, this is 1964, you're in California, but still, I mean, in this era, the idea of a black man being murdered and the police not looking into it at all, you know, or really caring that much, is, well, I mean, heck, we have some of that happening even today, but especially at that time, that's not an isolated case. That sort of thing, you know, is happening. So there's some other interesting stuff, and I'll give you a couple of the different theories that exist. Some that make some sense, some that maybe are a little bit crazier.
All right, ready for both.
But there's a couple things to note. So one thing that's just a little bit curious is that Bertha Franklin, the manager of the hotel, she had shot somebody about 6 months prior in pretty much the same circumstances.
That's super weird. And this is documented that this happened?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Like very parallel, similar circumstances. Now, granted, she's the manager of a motel, you know, in LA. So it could happen.
And it sounds like, you know, one of those motels. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah, it very much sounds like it's one of those motels for sure.
Like there's a quarter machine by the bed, maybe type of motel, like one of those type of operations.
Yeah, exactly. And there was something I'm blanking on a little bit. I don't want to like misstate this completely. But there was something where Bertha Franklin herself and Elisa, there was some question as to whether, I believe they were caught up in prostitution style things a little bit later on. I want to say that Elisa was busted 6 months later for that's what. Sorry. My old brain, Blake. I get my notes and then I get in here and I'm like, what happened?
Yeah, no, I understand.
Well, anyway, so Elisa Boyer, the woman that Sam went out with, she offers sex to an undercover cop some period later after this.
I see.
And is arrested for that. Now, granted, just because that happened then doesn't mean that's what was happening with Sam. Who knows? She went through a whole lot of stuff. But there's some questions around this a little bit as to what might have been happening.
Almost as if I don't want to get too far ahead of my skis there, but like if I'm looking at this with a skeptic's point of view, almost like maybe the situation maybe did happen as described, but almost could have been engineered by somebody.
Yeah, that's one of the predominant theories. So like another thing that came up that made a lot of people curious is that at the restaurant they were at earlier, police interviewed some of the different people around that, and the general sense was that he had been seen flashing a lot of money one way or the other at the restaurant. He had a Ferrari at the time, which is kind of dope. I would love to see what Sam Cooke's like early 60s Ferrari looked like. That'd be pretty cool.
Googleable. I'll have to do that after the show.
Oh yeah, 100%. Yeah, but there was a sense that he had a lot of money at the time, which Sam was a wealthy dude, so that's not necessarily crazy. The restaurant's this place called Martoni's, and afterwards, police searched the purse, and they only found a $20 bill in Elisa Boyer's purse, but a search of Cooke's Ferrari found about $108, which is a lot of money these days. That's like $1,000-ish dollars today, but it doesn't seem to add up with the amount of money that people were talking about Sam flashing.
Right.
The sense was that he had a big wad of money there.
Yeah. More like $500, $600, $700, $800, in that money, that time.
Yeah. And enough money that you would notice the stack.
Right.
Like a few people at the restaurant were like, oh yeah, he had a big
wad of money.
Wad of money. Enough that they noticed that he had a bunch of money with him.
Even if he had 100 ones, it wouldn't present as a big wad, So
that's a really good point.
Yeah. So he almost certainly had more than that. So at some juncture, and we know he had access to it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So there's definitely, I would say, kind of the most plausible of the various, thoughts about this is that there was a bit of a setup. So, Elisa had gone out with Sam, and it was maybe, this is not me speaking as myself, but this is people, what people kind of are suggesting could have occurred there. Elisa is, perhaps a prostitute, or perhaps, coming onto Sam with a clear intention, and that her story of Sam driving past multiple hotels, that's not true. Perhaps she very much engineered that they would go to this particular hotel, where she knows the manager, Bertha Franklin, and was able to kind of set up this whole thing, basically to get his money. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So simple enough. Basically, he was kind of set up to be the John that got robbed in this whole thing. Now, if you did buy that conspiracy, I think I would assume that you wouldn't say that they wanted to murder him.
No, I think they would just want to take the money and vanish, basically.
Take the money, yeah, and maybe it's useful to have the hotel manager in on it so that, you can kind of cover your tracks and all that. I don't know.
Or at least
or lead the police astray.
Yeah, something. I could see, like, this guy's probably going to come running after me. Don't tell him where I'm going. Here's $100 type of thing. Yeah, exactly. Some sort of deal like this. Or, some people imply that this was kind of a game they ran between Elisa and Bertha, that they would take Johns there and rob them or whatever.
and have their tracks kind of covered.
That does happen. So
it's definitely a thing, right? So that's like, that's kind of it's a plausible explanation for what could have happened. Evidence is weird. I mean, outside of just like with any of this stuff, there's not like conclusive evidence to one side or the other. It's just like, where's the money, that people allegedly saw? Because they didn't find it in the Ferrari. They didn't find it on Elisa. They didn't find it in the room. There should be more money hanging around one way or another. So that's a little bit interesting. I will then jump to the most kind of outlandish, in my opinion, of the theories. His manager, Alan Klein, who's like a legendary manager in his own right, ended up with his catalog. The way that their contract kind of worked out was such that if something happened to Sam, perhaps under certain circumstances or whatever, Alan Klein would get the rights to Sam's music. So some have accused Alan Klein of basically setting up his client's murder in order to get this. Now there's just no anything to go off of here in terms of like substantiating evidence. It's just who was the person that stood to benefit. I would offer, though, this doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me because I think Alan Klein would make a lot more money from an alive Sam Cooke.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say.
That could continue touring.
Yeah, like the only point that would make sense, you wouldn't. This is just me putting on Dr. Evil hat for a second, right? Like I'm going to be a bad person and I'm going to try to exploit this situation.
Or Doc Holliday hat, if you will, with your Tombstone shirt.
Yeah, I'll be your Huckleberry. But like if he really wanted to maximize profits, yes, an alive Sam Cooke would be the way to go. The only way this would make sense is if Sam Cooke was somehow faltering, like he saw like this guy's developing a lot of problems. He's going to not be able to make me money pretty soon because of I'm just spitballing here. Substance abuse, or maybe this womanizing is getting out of control. Whatever. His life's going to spin out of control and he's not going to make me any more money. He'll make me more dead than alive. But that doesn't really make sense. That's like a big if. That's a super huge stretch. To me,
that makes sense.
He's at his peak,
this man,
right?
Yeah, he's at his peak, and Alan Klein managed the Rolling Stones. So Keith Richards is still alive, and I would think that if you murdered your client whenever you thought they weren't going to last for very long, Keith Richards had been dead a long time ago.
Yeah, well, maybe he discovered the truth, which is Keith Richards can't be killed.
That's fair. Maybe he tried.
Yeah. No, I think that's a pretty big stretch because I bet you Alan would have preferred a touring Sam Cooke over a dead Sam Cooke.
I tend to agree. I don't know what their deal was, but like, a standard like 15% of all revenue that an artist generates is a lot of money. Mm-hmm. It's quite a bit. No, a catalog, that's worth a lot too, but
it is, but not the same as if he had kept making music and building that catalog.
Right. 100%. And so I should also note, like jumping back to theory number one, that there's, just this kind of rip the John off, deal going on. Now, again, that could always be a fast way to make a couple $100 or a couple thousand. I don't know how much, he allegedly had on him. But the other tricky thing there too, is like, she knew he was Sam Cooke. She definitely went out to dinner with him. Mm-hmm. There are people that saw them together. Well, I would think you could get more money. I think there's a lot of ways that situation makes you more money than just ripping him off for what he's got there. You could blackmail him. You could extort him. You could convince him to divorce his then wife and marry you. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of ways to get some scratch out of that. Yeah. That are more involved. Granted, maybe they just wanted the quick and dirty smash and grab. I don't know.
But I have to imagine, I mean, even at this time, there are a lot of way less famous people with a few $100 you could rob, and nobody's going to really pay attention to the fact that they're gone, rather than, drag this huge spotlight onto you. It's like, you killed Sam Cooke.
That's the thing, right? If you were like running this game around LA all the time, like it's one thing. If it were me, I would avoid the big giant celebrity that could figure out how to get, find me or get back at me. I also like. I'm sure this happens, so I'm going to sound like an idiot here, but to me, if I was in the John Robin game, I wouldn't go out to a very public dinner beforehand.
No. No.
Because a bunch of people at the restaurant were like, yeah, she was with him. Because they even were like, they seem to be getting along great. And that people use that to kind of suggest that her story didn't make sense over the years.
That's impossible.
Yeah, I wouldn't do that
unless
either.
You're sitting at the table with them, though. That's so speculative.
100%. Yeah. And it's worth noting, and we'll talk about this more when we get to kind of the end of this. But this is a time, I would argue that we're not even there yet now, but to the extent that we've made a lot of headway in believing women with what they say, we had not made any of that headway then.
True.
And definitely from like the moment this is announced in 64, for many decades thereafter, I think a lot of these conspiracies do revolve around people's tendency to not want to believe the woman telling you exactly what happened. Because, her account is basically, we went out to dinner. I wanted to go home. He wouldn't take me home. He tried to rape me. And then, I had to run away. And that's what led to all this. And yeah, from day one, like a lot of members of the general public were like, I don't believe that woman. And you hear a lot of the evidence commonly cited is that other people at the restaurant said they were having a good time. And you're like, oh yeah. So since she was like laughing at dinner, that means that she consented to everything that happened thereafter.
Nobody's ever laughed while under duress to try to, appease the person in power.
Also, I've had dinner with a lot of people that I've enjoyed, such as yourself, that I've had a lovely dinner. And yet if you tried to, make me go to a hotel room with you after the dinner, I would not want to do that anymore.
Come on, Scott, come with me.
Exactly. Even though I enjoyed the dinner, that may have been all that I wanted to happen there.
Hey, you enjoyed the dinner. Come back with me.
That's the voice I hear in my nightmares. That's exactly right. So yeah, there's a lot of that going on throughout all of this and through how it was all kind of decamped. But we're not through with all of the theories yet.
Oh, okay. Here we go.
Yeah. Because the theory that I think is the most interesting, and I'm not a big tinfoil hat like guy. That's what you're here for in the podcast. I'm joking. I'm sorry.
No, that is what I love to present outlandish things that I don't usually believe, but it's fun.
The most interesting theory to me is that, so these are, not even quite early days, but definitely like there's a thriving civil rights movement at the time. And, you have Martin Luther King Jr. and you have Muhammad Ali, who's really close to Sam Cooke. You have Sam Cooke as like one of the major voices of that. Like he was seen as a major voice, involved in that, in the civil rights movement. And so some have speculated that what if the FBI, in fact, had set this whole thing up? Sam's a noted womanizer, so that's kind of an easy cover. We just got to get this girl to come in, and then she leaves, and that's all she knows. And then, we set up something with the hotel manager, and we'll make sure that there's another woman that's on the phone, so she heard it too. And in fact, what we did is we, beat the crap out of Sam Cooke, and then shot him. And then he died. And now there's one less, member of the civil rights movement leadership around. And it's just kind of an easy explanation because of, his habits. Make him a little bit of an easier character for that. The biggest thing to kind of substantiate this is that the reports of what had happened, like they reported that Sam's like hands were broken and like his nose was mangled. And like I said, Etta James said this, his head seemed barely attached to his body. There were reports that he was really, really messed up. And the idea that this, a lone hotel manager, like not just like shot him in the gut, but like also like managed to like beat the snot out of him is weird. And how does his hand get broken in that? Unless he's trying to hit her, but she was not, crazy
the hand
injured.
breaking I could see from getting through the door.
Oh, that makes sense.
Yep. And it depending on, I don't even know what kind of toxicology reports were available at the time, and I certainly don't know if they even did one.
That didn't come up. I'm sure that it would find stuff. I'm sure that he was inebriated considerably.
So you could break your hand. Depending on how bad he was, and I don't know. I'm purely speculating. It's just depending on how crazy he was feeling at the moment. You could do a lot of that yourself. If he's freaking out, if he's like absolutely having a fit and the door's locked and he's going to come through it no matter what. I don't think that's enough to like take it to the Etta James description, but it's enough to do some serious damage to your body. And
yeah, that's fair.
I don't know if he was.
It's also weird.
I don't know if he was
understand
that unhinged or not, though.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like, I mean, you never know what state somebody was in mentally, because in most states, you know, you're going back with a prostitute and she steals your clothes and you're angry, but like I don't know if you're like punching walls and stuff, but who knows? You know, I don't know what the guy's like.
I've met people who would be punching walls in this situation.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah.
That's fair. Yeah, people can be that way. But anyway, so you know, this theory goes that basically, you know, the G-men took care of all that, and then kind of used the women as a nice easy setup to take care of this. I think this is an interesting theory. We definitely know that like the FBI in this era is keeping a very close watch on civil rights leaders.
Oh, just in this era.
Well, yeah, for sure. But it's there's a lot of talk about it in this era, right? And so, you know, it's a little kooky, but not necessarily crazy out there.
It actually makes a little more sense to me than the John Robbins story. It's a lot. There's a lot more moving parts here, but the reason I say it makes a little more sense to me is because we know that they do these kinds of things.
Yeah,
that's the thing. We know that the FBI has been involved in things like this over the years, so that makes it way less of a stretch. So, some of this stuff has been declassified, not Sam Cooke's, obviously, but because that would take a pretty big admission. But they've declassified some insane things that the FBI have done that are not even as crazy as this.
Yeah.
So I almost am inclined to believe this over they just wanted a few $100 off Sam Cooke. I don't know.
I know what you mean. There's something to it that makes some sense. You know, the only thing that makes it seem a little odd to me is that like I would think out of those kind of major leaders at the time, I don't think he would be the top of the list. But for all maybe they were trying this stuff on all sorts of different people that they could at the time. Maybe they didn't want the top of the list. Maybe they were trying it on all sorts of different people, and then it just didn't work on all of them. And this is kind of the one that it took. You know.
Based on, so these are all the major theories, right?
These are the major theories. Yeah. I'm sure somebody has, talked aliens and whatnot as well. But these are kind of the major ones. And the Alan Klein one, I think, is really, really thin. So I think it's really like, is it like just kind of a simple setup robbery thing? Is the original story just true? Of course, that's very much a standard thing. Or is it like an FBI thing?
I'll tell you this, and this is just based on this conversation and this conversation alone. And you pretty much just touched on all the stuff that I had heard, plus a bunch of extra theories that I hadn't heard. But the main story I was pretty familiar with, and my gut is that's probably what happened. That's how I feel about the story, like the women's story.
Yeah. It makes some sense.
There's definitely holes in it, and there's definitely things I don't fully. Like especially the condition of his body is like that's a little weird, but I can also I've seen people go that crazy before. Maybe that's just because I live in Portland, but I've definitely seen people be at that level of insanity, for lack of a better term, where they could do that kind of damage to themselves. They really could.
Yeah.
I don't know that Sam was ever like that. I don't know if he had tendencies that way. I know that you have to have a little bit of crazy to even be in this situation in the first place, though.
Yeah, and by all admit, like by anyone's theory, Sam, who was married at the time, is like out on a public date with a woman that is not his wife, and is taking her back to some kind of seedy motel.
That's not exactly.
And it's probably not the first time.
Yeah,
that this happened. This is probably. Yeah. No, it's not. And this is seemingly after many years of this type of behavior. And that is the other thing too. Like if you think about something like getting robbed and there being a gun pulled and stuff like that. If it's the only time you've ever been in a situation like this, maybe that's a little unlikely. But this might have been the 100th something time that there was some situation, like this. And if you're making a habit of doing that stuff every night, at some point, something's going to go awry.
It's going to go bad, right? Yeah, that kind of just instability and those choices. And if you've been doing it for that long, I have a sneaky suspicion you get bolder and bolder and bolder. And, you know, pretty soon you are just like, I'm in public. I'm Sam Cooke. What are they going to do? You know, you kind of get that built up. And plus people are rushing your stage every night, just screaming about how much they love you. Like, it's going to do something to you.
This is 64, right? Like a man that looks like that, sings like that, and is that famous and huge. When a woman's like, no, I don't want to go have sex with you. Like, it's not exactly a stretch to think that guy is just like, yes, you do.
Right.
And just makes it happen because they think they can do anything they want. So yeah, it's tricky. I mean, to me, like looking at the whole story, like while I think like the FBI thing's kind of interesting, more than anything though, I think about like, I was surprised to hear how many kind of sort of conspiratorial theories there are around this. And that's the interesting thing to me is that they exist at all. And I think that really this is just like one of countless stories of the public refusing to believe a woman telling you exactly what happened.
Right. Yep.
And so there has to be some other story. She was trying to rip him off or whatever. That's what it reads like to me.
He was also a really beloved figure. So like nobody wants to hear that about their heroes. Nobody.
No, and it's interesting too. I mean, like you have Etta James and Muhammad Ali and like a lot of like great and interesting people in their own right that think it's weird too. So it's a tough one. There's not like a real clean line there, in terms of who you want to side with.
Yeah.
On it. But I agree. It reads to me like that's why the conspiracies are happening. It's hard to believe it about this guy and who's this woman saying whatever. That's a prevalent attitude of the day.
Yeah. Well, this was an interesting case to get into. I'll be real. I knew that Sam Cooke was killed, but it wasn't until about a month ago. I'm glad you'd grabbed this one because I thought we might explore this at some point. I just wasn't expecting it to be so soon. But I started.
I beat you to it.
You did. You did a good job too. So thank you. But yeah, I was listening to listening and researching about this lightly because I thought we might get into this at some point. So I guess our spidey senses were both kind of tingling here a little bit, but I didn't know the circumstances of his murder. It was one of those things where it's like, oh yeah, Sam Cooke got shot. That's how he died. I didn't pay much attention to it beyond that. And I definitely should have, because it's a way crazier story than he just got murdered by somebody. Like nobody really it's
just
gets murdered by somebody.
No, a murder is always an event, one way or the other. But I know what you mean. And it's hard to tell if it was kind of just a simple cut and dry thing, or if, the theories I think are what make it interesting. And we've had a lot of decades to go on this. So I'm sure there's people out there that have pulled the coroner's reports and all this sort of stuff and gone to incredible depth on it. But I'm with you. For me, if I have to pick one, I'm going with the girls here. But whoever really knows. But anyway, after this night, just a couple weeks later, A Change Is Gonna comes out.
Wow.
Yeah. That is like a posthumous thing, that then becomes, the song, of the civil rights movement, hence like from there forward. What a crazy, powerful thing.
Well, and now thinking about that too, with that song, I kind of forgot that the timeline here got a little blurry for me, but that possibly is why so many of us, especially who weren't around at that time, have that view, because that song is very closely associated with the civil rights movement. And that's how I knew that he was killed, by the kind of the messaging and like the things they would have at protests and this song coming out. And it was like, and Sam Cooke was murdered. Well, he was. But he wasn't just randomly murdered, like MLK kind of was.
Right.
It was definitely a weird situation for sure.
Yeah, well, I guess the MLK murder is a less random murder. This is at least following the main thing. This is a truly random.
Well, yeah, I didn't mean
he
random.
Could have been anyone.
What I meant more is like that was like very targeted and on purpose.
Yeah.
No matter who did it, it was a very intentional, like, we're going to kill this guy situation.
Yeah. And this is at least allegedly, I'm going to kill the next guy that comes banging through my door and tries to wrestle me. And that so happened to be one-shoed Sam Cooke. Not to make light of it because, legendary man in career. But Yeah, it's all very fascinating to me. It's always interesting, especially with older, musicians of the 50s and 60s and prior. It's always interesting to me to have these people that have these like saccharine pop songs. And then, you hear the stories, and they're people, because people have been just as people-y as ever, going back a very long time.
Oh, yeah.
But it's funny to just like kind of contrast the sweetness of the music with, these people being bad boys, out on their own and getting into all sorts of things.
It's one of those, it's like the difference between like, we knew that Pantera was Pantera, that we knew that they were doing all that before they released all those VHS tapes. That was just who they were, and to put it like, if the Backstreet Boys were doing the same stuff, which they probably kind of were to some degree, it just doesn't match up character wise. Like the onstage presence is just much different versus some like gnarly, Lemmy Kilmister, style rocker. Where it's like, yeah, that guy's definitely doing a lot of crazy stuff. Sam Cooke does not present that way at all. No. At least to most people. So
it doesn't seem that way.
But it seems like by all accounts, he was his own type of wild.
Oh yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, it's an interesting story. And, obviously like to anyone out there, like, it's a tough story. Like you've got definitely like sort of, Me Too elements in there. You've got racial elements in there, like all over. So there's plenty of that. And, hopefully we're respectful to, that side of it as we try to kind of unpack it. The thing is, it's just difficult to know exactly what happened. But I think part of the reason is so much of it is so plausible is that you do have, on one side of the story, a wealthy black man in 1964. And then on the other side of the story, you have, a woman accusing someone of attempted rape in 1964. And either of those two demographics of people are people in, in a tough time to be, taken care of by their society.
Yeah.
One way or the other.
Definitely. It's a really unfortunate twist that like we'll never really know. But then we wouldn't be talking about it if we had his side of the story, right? Because he'd still be alive. So
exactly.
And who knows? We'd probably be questioning some of his side too. Like, what do you mean X, Y, Z?
Mm-hmm.
There'd probably be some.
Oh, I bet.
So everybody's perspective is their own, and you can't. It's very, very difficult to go out from beyond that, especially when you're in a stressful situation like that. You really only have that tunnel vision, like that. Yep. That's what happened, and that's how I saw it. Even if there was, a G-man behind the scenes, you still only know what you saw.
Who knows?
Yeah.
Yep. Well, Blake, I'll let you read us out.
Well, folks, thank you for hanging out for another riff session. Wherever you're watching this or listening to this or wherever you're absorbing this content, do your part, leave a heart. Give us a 5-star review, drop us a comment, correct us on anything that we got wrong. We're going to get things
or expand.
Wrong.
There's a lot, like all of them, there's a lot more to these stories than what we're able to cover in an hour, for sure.
Yep. And as always, folks, like we're not trying to cover every single detail about someone's life in these. We're zooming way in on a very particular part and doing our best to tell those stories. So obviously, if there's anything that we need to know that we don't know, drop it in the comments on YouTube or wherever you're getting this wonderful content, and share it with your friends, because that's how we keep it going. Does that work? Is that good?
Yeah, it'll work.
Okay. All right, folks. We'll talk to you later.